Hey, y'all. It is January 7th in the year 2021, and I am grateful to be alive and breathing and here to share another hopefully fabulous, healing, medicinal episode of What's the Big Idea? A talk plus show for audacious visionaries. Um, so much today, so much in the wake of the events of January 6th. And I am feeling a lot of gratitude to be in conversation and co dreaming space with the wonderful and fabulous. I'm really into glitter fabulous these days, and I feel like Emmanuel will welcome that. But the glitter fabulous Emmanuel Brown, and I'm going to bring Emmanuel right on in so that we can get this party started.
Hey
Hello.
Ron, I am totally appreciative of Glitter Fabulous. Even though I'm
Yes.
not a big glitter user, I feel like my life could be. Um, thank you so much for inviting me into this conversation so long ago. Who knew on this serendipitous day
Yes.
after a groundbreaking day that we would be in this space with one another together? Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be in community with you and with anybody who is with us live or listening later.
Indeed. Indeed. Yes. Welcome to all of those whose virtual communion we have today. And yeah, this will be in perpetuity, living somewhere on the internet, on YouTube. And I hope this can continue to be a welcoming space, even in the post space. So, Emmanuel, what would you like to share with folks who are tuning in? Your bio is in the show notes in YouTube. There are links to some of the fabulous work you've been stewarding. But in terms of what you're bringing to our conversation today and what you'd like folks to know, what would you like to share?
Yeah, thanks for that invitation about what do I want to share today. So, what is always important to me to begin to share is that I get to steward 8 acres of land in occupied Muskogee Creek Indigenous Territory in Georgia. And that's so important because I really think my being on this land has shifted and changed my life, right?
Mm,
To be able to dream, be and see right in front of me, and to be able to be in a space where, as life happens, as the meltdown of these systems continue to occur,
mm,
I have the spaciousness, the literal spaciousness to be in the wave of emotion, to release and things like that. The other thing that feels really important to me is that I'm a Black trans masculine person living in America in 2021, and
mm,
like to imagine all of the ancestors and transcestors that have made it possible for me to be here, all of
mm.
the trailblazers, especially within the Southern landscape,
Yes.
that made it possible for me to be in this space. All of the people who died not ever coming into their fullness and into their full humanity, feel important for me to both invite into the space and show gratitude
Mm,
inside of that. And that those are the people that I walk with and I carry with me into every dreaming that I have into the future. Um, and then finally to be like, like I'm the homie, like yesterday was me, a lot of me being the homie that calls and checks in and makes sure people are good and people are good in their mind, body, and spirit.
yes.
And talking with my sister as she's watching the news unfold throughout the day, and just making sure like we know that like, hey, we got us, right? Like at the end of the day, we've had us and we continue to have us. And those feel like the most important things for me to mention in this particular time. I'm sure as we're talking, folks will be able to kind of learn more about how I make my imprint on this planet in this particular moment. But yeah, thank you for the invitation to share what feels good for me now.
For sure. And can you, since you mentioned it already, can you just share a little bit more about that 8 acres of land and how you call it and what the stewardship
Yeah.
is about?
So 8 acres of land is Acorn Center for Restoration and Freedom.
Mm,
It is an inspired dream that was inspired by the work of Octavia Butler, my ancestors, some who knew what land ownership felt like, others who knew land only through displacement,
mm,
others who knew land only as leaving it as forced captives, right?
mm,
In particular, my ancestor Elizabeth Brown, who is from the Bahamas,
mm,
is the ancestor that I can trace back the furthest who owned land and stewarded land in the Bahamas, right? In the 1800s. So for me, this is a continuation of that legacy. And it is an opportunity, right? An opportunity for us to have a space where Black and Brown folks, BIPOC folks, movement folks, LGBT folks, like we can come and find the things that we need, right? So if you need restoration, it's here. If you need a place to be creative with your team, it's here. If you need a place of refuge, literally from your circumstances,
mm.
it's here. And so that's what Acorn is and is becoming. I am a committed steward to this space for the next 30 years, right? So it's this an intergenerational vision that
Mm.
is pulling me and pushing me forward constantly. And also, it's land. So it moves at Earth's speed, which is a different speed than I move often because I am an air sign on top of an air sign with some water inside on top of some more air. So it's like this earth speed. Sometimes I'm like, oh, we going that. Okay, that's okay. That's how slow we going. So
Yeah.
really feeling into like how to be all of that, but also move at the speed of the dirt and the rocks and the wind and the water and everything that is here. So we function on site as a retreat center. We also
Mm.
provide live and virtual programming that is in what I call the Hearts Justice Arena, which is a combination of healing arts and spiritual justice work. And it's right, like our work is centered on Black diasporic wisdom and affirming gender freedom. And we get up to all kinds of things. So please, please, please visit the website to see what we've been up to and what we're being to. And this is both like my home, but it's also this deep, deep, deep offering to community.
Word. Thank you for sharing. And I
Yeah.
went ahead and I usually do this at the end of the show, but put up the link for people to donate. But since you mentioned the website, check it out at Acorn Center number 4 freedom.com and learn more about this beautiful work and share some funds. We'll put it up again at the end. All right. So I want to move us on into the other part of the introductions, I should say, which is how are you experiencing pleasure today, dear Emmanuel? What are
Mm.
you bringing in terms of what's in your zone, in your space that's pleasureful to you today?
Yeah, I mean, most immediately is this lovely outfit. So
Yes,
many people who
yes.
know me know that I love fashion and clothes and things like that. And I'm not so worried about being on trend, but like being something, right? So whatever that today. So today, I actually have an elder that we joke about her aesthetic being like cozy chic. And so I was really trying to embody that today, where it's like, what is the cozy yet camera ready vibe that I wanted to put in. And that is just an act of pleasure for my body and my spirit, for my gender. Gets a lot of pleasure around picking out and being meticulous with the way I choose clothing. So that's a huge pleasure practice today. My other pleasure practice, which is often a winter practice, is my movement practice. So,
Mm,
really allowing myself, my body to tell me how it needs to move as my first offering of the morning, right?
mm,
Like, not waiting until midday or things like that, but like giving my body first priority in the morning has really beautiful. So, today that looked like doing some weightlifting and some stretching. and a lot of like circular motioning. And then finally, I'll talk about, as you'll see me sipping on it. So, tea is my longest term pleasure practice of life.
Ah,
It's the first way that I was introduced and found plant medicine. I was like, oh, I could put it in tea.
mm,
Um, and so I have realms and realms and realms of tea items, tea things, tea cups that I enjoy. So today I'm sipping on a vanilla chai with cloves and lavender. So that and a little bit of oat milk. So that is bringing me great pleasure. What about you, Ron? How are you centering pleasure
yes.
in your day today?
Yes. Okay. As my dear friend Etzer knows, I'm all about a swaddle. So I am wearing my favorite swaddling garment. Excuse the noise, but yes, it's just like a
Yes.
giant piece of
Yes.
knit fabric that I can hide in if I need to. It feels very important for Turtle Days. I also have on my Protect Black Women T-shirt, which I got from my friend and a great organizer, Rania. And I'm wearing this beautiful necklace that an elder and mentor of mine, Tia Oros Peters of the Zuni people, gifted to me. She makes regalia for her tribe, if I'm remembering correctly, and gifted this to me for the
Mm.
work that we did together, doing some organizing and philanthropy. So whenever I'm in the Southwest, where I am right now, I feel called particularly to wear this for protection and remembrance and a sense of invitation. And the last thing I'll share is I have my emotional support cactus,
Yes.
which I brought with me on my journeys, and its name is Pokey, and I
Yes.
really love Pokey. They're
Nice.
great. So yes, those are my those are my pleasureful things for the day. Oh, this chair is so noisy. Okay, um, I think that's it. Oh, and I also have a beverage here. This
Nice.
is cold brew that I like to make, and this beautiful mug. That's what I'm
Yeah.
really into.
So
Uh,
lovely.
so yes, I feel like every day, but particularly in the wake of a day like yesterday, I just want to remind everyone that pleasure is available to us in the smallest ways, in the most everyday, accessible ways. It is always, always available to us. So yes, let's lean in. Let's lean into that wisdom
Yeah.
from Adrienne Marie Brown, from so many others. I feel
Yeah.
like that's where it is.
It's always an invitation to what are the things that we can always access no matter what the conditions are. And pleasure has been one of those things, joy has been one of those things for me. So thank you for that invitation and reminder and offering to the people.
Yes, indeed. All right. So the last thing I want to do is ask, as we enter the space together, Emmanuel, if you have any intentions for our time together.
Hmm. Whew. I mean, we prepped 2 days ago and the world is completely different now.
Right? It does that sometimes.
Which we were like, we spoke out loud, like, we'll see what happens. But like,
Woo!
um, so I think my intentions for today are to speak what is true, what is necessary, and what is a reminder
Mm,
for myself and for everyone who is listening. So to speak what is true, what is necessary, and what is a reminder.
word. Thank you. My intentions are to be where I'm at and not try to be anywhere else, which is to say, to be really present and to enjoy this time, to enjoy it.
Hmm.
Those are my intentions. All right. So and we've been alluding to this thing. So for the sake of the archive, I will just say that yesterday there was an insurrectionist coup at the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., instigated by our current president and his ardent supporters to overturn the election results that so many people, so many courts have already determined are fully legitimate. also on the same day that 2 Democratic senators were formally deemed elected in the state of Georgia, from which I come and where Emanuel currently resides. So there's just, whoa. One of whom is a Black pastor, Reverend Warnock. The other is a Jewish man, John Ossoff.
Mm-hmm.
History being made all over the place in so many ways. It's just a whirlwind. Yesterday felt like 3 days, maybe a whole week in the span of 24 hours. So just for the sake of grounding in the future, in the present.
Yeah.
All right. So we have 2 minutes each to vent now in this segment, to quote unquote air our grievances if we must. I'm so glad that there's a time limit on this, because I feel like we could have wrapped everything for a while. And I do want to make sure that we get into the dreaming space, which is the heart of the show. And I feel like this is such an important entryway to clear the air, if you will, to remove what might be on the surface of our experience at the moment, to afford ourselves all of the spaciousness that we need to do the very critical, strategically important work of dreaming ourselves free into the future, the present, and the past. So with all of that, Emanuel, I'm going to set this timer. And when you hear the little chimes, your 2 minutes will have ended. We'll take 3 breaths to further release, focusing on that exhale, whatever needs to be removed from our system so that we can do the dreaming work. I will then go for 2 minutes. We'll take the 3 breaths, and then we'll move into the flow. Sound good?
Sounds good to me. Let me know when I should start.
You tell me.
I'm ready.
Here you go.
Well, first off, my first grievance is definitely the connecting any of the things that happened yesterday with white supremacists, with protests, or anarchy, right? What we noticed yesterday was an act of domestic terrorism that was meant to stop the flow of government, right? And that is not a protest, right? In some countries, that is the first step into an all-out civil war. Right. So I think just people who are languaging, so the media that's been languaging this as protests and then making comparison to Black Lives Matter protests that were true protests, meaning people were coming to the state capitol to say, we already were told that we deserve these things and you have not given it to us. And therefore, we are asking for the things that we have been promised. We have been promised not to be subjugated and policed to the extreme nature that we've been promised, right? So that to me is the first step of like, people make sure that you're using the right language to describe this. If you are not calling this a coup, if you are not calling this domestic terrorism, if you are not calling this an insurrection against the democracy in the United States government at its seat of power, then don't call it at all. Do not call it a protest. It is not the same and should not be governed in the same way. Second off, and I think everybody is, in my community has been feeling this, and it's a mixture of sadness and grief and rage about the lack of police presence, right? The lack of police presence with mobs of white peoples who were carrying assault rifles and automatic weapons and bombs. Okay, like Black people can't go outside and sing in a group without being policed. I'll leave it there. I hear my chime.
Yes, indeed. All right, thank you. Let's do some breathing, focusing on that release. Let's inhale and release. Yeah, shake it out. Inhaling a second time. And release. And one more inhale. And release. Thank you. All right. I'm so tired of people talking about this being a democracy. I'm so tired of it. I've said this before during a venting session in What's the Big Idea. We use that word so loosely. And it's even more irksome to me than something like friend or community. But it's just such a blatant not understanding of what the actual structure of this country is, which is not a pure democracy. We have a republic, which means we have representatives and da 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 da. The founders specifically did not want to have a direct democracy because they did not trust the people not to overthrow them. That is what that was about, including enslaved people. Punto. And so I'm just like, why do we keep saying this? Yes, it's shorthand. Maybe it's easy. Maybe it's convenient, but it plays into a very white supremacist, settler colonialist myth of, you know, some sort of divine right of king style origin of this country. However, saying that they were overthrowing a monarchy and da da da, like didn't want to be a colony anymore. Anyway, I just am really over the rhetoric and I watched the news, which I never do yesterday because the spectacle was one of those train wrecks that I'm so not used to watching train wrecks on the media. So once I tuned in, I had a terrible time disengaging. So I just was like, let me just go with this. And the level of commitment people of all races and ethnicities and backgrounds who are these pundits on the shows have to upholding this mythology of American exceptionalism that has anything to do with anything but violence, which is the origin story of this country. Violent theft of land, violent genocide of indigenous peoples, violent death, enslavement, capture, torture of African people. Like, violence is the mythology that's truly holding up this thing. And I'm done with mythologies that aren't useful in that way or are violent in that way, because mythologies can be useful. Anyway, okay. Inhaling and releasing. Inhaling. Release. Inhaling. And release. Okay. Okay.
Whew.
Okay. Yes to release. Yes to venting.
Yes.
I grew up in a community where people would be like, how you doing? They'd be like, oh, I can't complain. I'd be like, yes, you can. You can complain. Complaining is something you can do. I welcome it in certain moments, like the one we just had. Cheers.
I call it the petty process. Like, where can I go and just be my most petty self, right? And just say the things that maybe I don't even truly believe, but I need to say. You know, like, I might not even believe them, Ron, but I do need to say them out loud sometimes.
It's important. It's and to be witnessed in the doing of that is important.
Listen, especially when you be on this dreaming side and this healing side of life, people think you don't have a petty. I'm like, the people who know my petty know my petty. And they be like, oh, okay, it's coming. Here it is. So thank you. I appreciate being invited into that space of release and just truth telling too.
I say. Well, let's do it. Let's move into the dreaming segment. So I like to open this up with a fairly open question. So, Emanuel Brown, what are you dreaming about and visioning for our collective future?
Yeah, I'm going to ground this segment with this piece of Earthseed that I put out. And it feels important to me. So I'm going to read a little bit and then I'm going to talk about my current interpretation of what all of this means. So this is from Earthseed, the Books of the Living, and Parable of the Talents by Octavia E. Butler. The destiny of Earthseed is to take root among the stars. It is to love and to thrive on new earths. It is to become new beings and to consider new questions. It is to leap into the heavens again and it is to explore the vastness of heaven. It is to explore the vastness of ourselves. So I think that's what I'm dreaming, right? Is like a place, right? And Acorn is so much of this for me. Where is the place, the physical location, the virtual location, the internal location in our bodies that we get to dream about the vastness of this universe and the vastness of ourselves. I think
Yes.
the two go hand in hand for me so deeply, Ron, where I'm like, the thing about what you're talking about the mythology of democracy is that democracy does exist, right?
Right.
Just not in America, right? And so the dreaming into the vastness of the heavens and the universe for me allows me to picture myself in places that have actually never felt or experienced, right? So I'll ground this with my own personal experience of like healing, right? So it's like for me, right, like I grew up in a community where no people went to church but nobody was talking about healing, right? People were talking about being saved but nobody was talking about liberation and freedom, right? So it was these juxtapositions of words where I was like, oh, maybe being saved is getting liberated, I don't know, but I actually don't actually I had not experienced what liberation is, but I started to dream up liberation, I started to dream up freedom and say, well, what do I think it could be? Right? If I was liberated in my body, my heart, my mind, my spirit, what would that feel like for me? And maybe I don't know, and maybe it's a myth, and maybe it's something that I will never experience or see. But what if I imagine that it's possible for me to do?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so for me, I really want, and so much of my work has been about helping people push their imagination into a freedom space, right? So that moment after liberation, right? The moment where, all the things have done so that you break free, that moment, that first step off of the plantation, once, everything, once slavery has ended, that moment of breaking out, like, who are you in that moment?
Mm.
Um, and I want
Mm.
people to experience that in their bodies, right? First,
Yes.
right? Because I think
Yes.
sometimes we've tried this thing from the outside in. And for me, what I want to see people do is really experience that from the inside out.
Ashe.
Right now, I'm playing around with this definition of freedom that is a meeting place of when we are able to be free in our relationships, when we are able to be free in ourselves, and we can meet the external conditions of freedom. Um, that's when freedom actually is happening, right?
Mm.
Anytime those three things are in play, but that we have to be able to meet the conditions, right? So if we were successful, right, in creating a liberated Black, pro Indigenous world tomorrow, would we be able to meet it with how we are with each other?
Ashe. That is a
And so
question.
that to me is like, the biggest thing that pulls me forward, right? That's
Mm.
why I started Acorn. That's why I started deepening in my own healing practices. That's why I started inviting people into radical relationship with each other. So, right, creating these containers where intimacy and vulnerability were the ways that we were going to connect. Um,
Yes.
and that to me is the thing that I think if we added into the equation of our activism, if we add it into the equation of the ways that we are seeking new worlds,
Mm.
then it becomes a much more whole and complete picture, right?
Yeah.
And why I ground that in the work of Earthseed really has to do with the fact that I'm like, that passage in particular
Mm.
feels like all of that to me, where it's like, listen, even if our destiny is to take root among the stars, right? Which, many Octavia scholars definitely speculate that she was literally talking about other planets and other places. But I'm like, even before we get to those other planets and other places, what does it mean to root ourselves and imagine that our destiny is to return back to the heavens, right? To become the cosmic dust that all of us are made up of? What kind
Mm-hmm.
of responsibility would we hold for each other? If it's like, yo, my future is to become carbon and the oxygen that is required for the next generation of living things, then do I hold a different responsibility in um, how I am, my ways of being in this way, in this iteration of my life, right? And that for me is the thing that I'm dreaming of, is just like that we as a people, right? That all of us imagine ourselves to be interdependently interconnected with each other, this land, this 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 earth, and to allow ourselves to be changed by that and how we are with each other, our dreamings about freedom, so
Yeah.
that we can meet any external conditions that might shift, right?
Right.
With our full power and our whole selves.
Hmm. Woo. Okay, there's so much in there. There's so much in there. Whoa. Okay. Um, the first question I have in hearing what you've shared, and thank you so much, is you mentioned this idea, the practice actually of pushing. What did you say? Pushing our imaginations, right?
Mm-hmm.
For how we can be free. What is the body we have in a free space?
Mm-hmm.
Is part of what I'm gathering from what you said.
Mm-hmm.
That's the question. And for me, what I was hearing is that there's a practice that you're leaning into around that liberation dreaming. So I'm curious, what does that practice entail for you? What are you exploring in terms of the day-to-day embodiment or
Mm-hmm.
exploration of the embodiment of freedom? What does that look like for you?
Yeah. Thank you for that. I think my practice begins, and I kind of came into practice through generative somatics, which introduced me to this idea of something that they call sitting practice.
Mm-hmm.
And it was sort of a combination of many things. And it became my foundational practice. And I also relate that practice to, the idea of the upper room, right? I grew up in the
Yes.
Black church. So the idea of the quiet place, right? It was the place of prayer where you could go in the church somewhere, or maybe there was an hour where the sanctuary was considered to be that place. And it was the quiet place of prayer where you could go, you could listen, you could feel. Maybe somebody was leading prayers or reading scriptures to guide you.
Mm.
And that for me is the foundation of my practice, is can I sit with myself
Mm.
long enough to
Mm.
move through the discomfort of sitting with myself, right? And
Mm-hmm.
all that this body contains and holds. Can I sit with myself long enough?
Yes.
And at first, I couldn't sit with myself long enough, Ron. I gotta tell you, anybody who knows me
Yes.
from about a
Yes.
decade ago, like it was very uncomfortable for me to sit for even 5 minutes with my own thoughts, right? I
Word.
had grown up in a world where I believed that thoughts meant that I had to produce. And so
Hmm.
to just be with my own thoughts, my own body, the way that my body was, feeling my own body, right? So total parts of my body were absolutely cut off from any kind of sensation,
Yes.
right? I couldn't
Yes.
feel my hips. I couldn't
Mm.
feel my chest. I
Mm.
couldn't feel my back. Like I
Mm.
was like, what are you talking about feeling to your back? I don't know. It don't feel like nothing back there, right? So
Yes.
just being able to first um literally, or figuratively sit with myself. Now, I'm not saying that to sit with yourself, it doesn't always like look like me sitting perfectly still and being, in position. Sometimes it looks like a gentle rock, right?
Mm-hmm.
That little bit of oscillation back and forth, because that's an old memory of
Yes.
comfort and knowing and Black
Yes.
ancestry that comes out, right? When we rock
Mm-hmm.
ourselves. Sometimes it does look like, throwing on some music and offering my body a little bit of movement. Sometimes it looks like being with a big tree or out in nature and going for a slow metered walk. It can look like a lot of things, but the question is, it's like, can you sit with yourself long enough to become aware of even what your own needs are and what you're
Whew.
carrying and
Whew.
what you're walking with and what you're holding?
Mm.
Can you sit with yourself long enough for that? You know, imagine how our world would be shaped differently if people sat with themselves before they made all kinds of decisions.
Child.
Right? Both in our personal lives, right? And also our systemic life, right?
Yeah.
If people
Can I
were
jump
being
in
like,
real quick?
yes, please.
Okay. So what you're touching on is so resonant with me. As you see, I've been in my little rock because you're preaching. And I feel like that question and what you're raising as the I wouldn't say inherent discomfort. Maybe it is inherent. I don't know. Of sitting with oneself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think it's a consistent discomfort across people,
Yeah.
at least when you're starting such a practice. Um, and like the longer you don't do it, the more uncomfortable it is, right? Because there's more to work through. There's more sensation to re-engage that has been shut off, right? And it's like that holding of a grocery bag with a lot of cans in it. It's like, okay, I know that when I release my hand, this is going to hurt. And I would rather keep holding it than release it because it's going to be pretty excruciating for that first 5 seconds. So
Right.
I'm just going to keep holding like that. That is emotionally, spiritually what so many of us are, I think, patterned and programmed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this unfurling of the hand, the proverbial metaphorical hand, is what a lot of this quarantine and pandemic life has presented people with.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Oh, I can't feel my back. I
Right.
don't want to know that I can't feel my back because then I have to know that. And
Right.
now I can do something with that. And what if I don't want to?
Right.
And so I just want to underscore that what you're offering in terms of practice, and I really appreciate you talking about the 10 years ago. The ooh, I don't even know like what hips, chest, what chest, like that is actually so much of what I think the discomfort of the last 10 months, 11 months
Mhm.
of quarantining off and on for those who can be at home, but even for those who are mobile, but for whom other activities are foreclosed,
Right.
for those who do have to go to work and don't have the privilege of staying home, but who have less spaciousness in their lives nonetheless,
Right.
that this sitting with oneself is a big part of what people are resisting, I think,
Right.
still.
Yeah.
um and the fact of the matter is, as my friend and teacher and sage Amara Tabor Smith has underscored so many times in conversation with me over the last year, that this virus is here to teach us something,
That's right.
and if we don't learn, we will suffer, right?
Right.
I'm
Right.
paraphrasing Amara's words, but that for me feels so consistent, right? We've got a
Right.
South African mutation of the virus that they don't even think these current vaccines will address because it's so
Right.
mutated, right? And the more the virus spreads, the more my science understanding says it will continue to mutate. And
Right.
the more people get it, the more mutations there will be, right? And
Right.
so if we are not diligent about the sitting our ass down
Right.
collectively, we
Right.
will continue to have to do that.
Right. Absolutely. And Ron, I think what you're saying is so brilliant because I think that there's not just even the personal sitting, but there's been the communal sitting, right? So
Exactly.
people who I know who are like, the people, we are trash to each other, right? Like the people that I thought were in my corner have not showed up. And I have actually
Mm.
no idea how to really show up for people in this way, right? So people have
Mm.
been able to really interrogate what does, like you said, that word community or friend or, and for some people that's also extended to partner, right? What does that really mean to me, right? There are these
Mm.
relationships that I have just been, being a robot through, doing the
Mm.
things that I think I'm supposed to be doing the things that look good on social media to do. But when the shit hit the fan, you know, there was no way for me to show up. I didn't know how. I actually wasn't in a real practice, right? So I think that sitting and coming to awareness has happened on that communal level. And then I think we're also witnessing it, it happen again on a mass, societal level of like,
Yes.
you know, oh, now people want to talk about, socialized medicine and free healthcare. Why can't we get back? I'm like, y'all were cool with health insurance companies 3 seconds ago, but now
Right.
when people are trying to become well on a mass level, now you see the issue with the health
Yes.
insurance
Right.
and the medical industrial complex in this particular country.
Right. And now that it is affecting you, now that it's affecting you, now that people being sick is affecting you, privileged privileged person that I'm conjuring with the you right now. But yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or any, and I think the you became really big, right?
Right.
You who has access to healthcare, but still it takes you 7 days through your health insurance provider to get a COVID test. What? That doesn't make any sense, right? That that doesn't make any sense in the middle of a pandemic. So I think people started to see themselves as, oh, like I was asleep. I wasn't quite aware of the
Right.
actual impact. And so I think that sitting with yourself is for me the first and base level thing. And here's the thing, y'all. I will say that I am not going to fool you to tell you that at any point does this feel comfortable. There was
Right.
always some measure of discomfort in
Yes.
sitting with oneself because you are ever changing and growing. So the things that I
Oh,
mastered 5 years ago, the things that I learned about myself 5 months ago are new today or will be
yes.
new in 5 months,
Yes.
right? There'll
Yes.
be some other place along the continuum, some depth that I have to gain, right?
Mm.
So if we are so afraid, our fear, Ron, what you're talking about, our fear of discomfort, of being aware of the ways that there might be lack or shift or things we would like to see transformed in ourselves is so high. And I think a part of the reason why it's high is because we don't have and what I'll talk about is the second practice is
Mm.
to also know that like you are good. You are perfect. You are exactly what you need to be. There's not actually anything wrong with you, right? So, that second practice of true self acceptance, self affirmation, um, being able to affirm the people who are
Yes.
around you as well, right? Like, I don't see anything in an isolated way. Like, I don't think we can do any of this just in a bubble by ourselves.
Yes.
So we have to extend what we're doing with ourselves to our people. Um, I think that second piece of acceptance of self, of being able to say, you know what, and I'm good today. This round belly, these big thighs, this whole situation is
Mm-hmm.
good today. The
Yes.
more we can do that is is directly related to how much we can sit with where there are places of discomfort, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
inside of there's magic, right?
Yes.
Those two things meeting up is the cosmos, is the heavens that Octavia, I believe she's talking about. It's the place of the unknown expansion and vastness that she says that we can be inside of, right? Is when
Yes.
those two places meet.
Yes. And that is I will continue to be a valid Black feminist, and mention all of the ways that Black feminists and Black feminist teachings have shaped me. But that to me is like such a Black feminist practice of
Right,
saying that I am infinite in my internal darkness, and
right,
that is a beautiful, creative, rich place,
right.
and it is nothing to fear. Although it may be uncomfortable, I
Yeah,
must sit with it.
yeah,
I must sit with it.
yeah, yeah.
Um, yes. Okay, I'm gonna do a celebratory swaddle because I
Yeah.
feel very I feel very held by the universe, and by this conversation. Um,
Yes.
there's so much. I wanna pull some threads.
Mhm.
I'm feeling in the through lines. I'm really feeling the through lines in these conversations, and
Yeah.
so um, I I really appreciate your returning us to thinking about the body. I think so much of the conversation to date about the importance of dreaming and the practice of dreaming and visioning is about spaciousness and making space. And so Ebony Noel Golden, for example, talked about like the spaciousness inside of her home as a peaceful place, as an altar, and how
Mm,
that translates into the body, the
right.
importance of the connection between those two things as a cultivation.
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing, of spaciousness, right?
Mhm.
Sharon Bridgeforth talked about the importance of healing as a general practice that makes space at all of the levels, physical, metaphysical, and everything in between and around those things, as critical to the work of dreaming. Elizabeth Mendez-Berry talked about finding home in her body through her pregnancy as one part of that, right? And saying, oh, this is a space that needs tending, right? This is a reconnection that is happening, a reintegration that's coming, right?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about my conversation with Laurel Butler in the last recap that we had at the end of last year, and she talked about this this Buddhist concept of interbeing, right? And I've also been reading, reaching around. Let me see, my little makeshift desk. This book, yay, yay, Alexis, Pauline Gums, thank you. And this notion that breathing as a planetary action. So I've been thinking about interbreathing and interbeing as entwined and connected. And so I appreciate you talking about the importance then of a larger physical space, this notion of what is our relationship to land as space that is creating the fertile conditions for dreaming and visioning as well, right? So at all of these levels, these concentric circles, if you will, from our internal cosmos of dark potentiality to the cosmos that holds our planet in suspension in space, that at each of those levels, there is a tending, there's an attention, there's a presencing that we need to be mindful of as we expand into the future with our visions and dreams, and as we heal the past with our visions and dreams, as we bring those things all together in the present. That feels this spiral and fractaling of space. Just feels so consistent throughout these conversations. And the through line of healing, the through line of sitting through the discomfort of recognizing our infinite potential and our infinite present, that those are the same thing, that we have it all. As you said, we are perfect right now. We are everything we need to be right now. That I actually think that's part of the, my camera's like flipped. That's part of the releasing, right? That's part of the discomfort. If I accepted that I was everything I need to be, and I've always been everything I need to be, what would I have to release in order to do that? What myths, what not useful myths, useful to somebody who is not about my liberation.
Correct.
What myths do I have to release in order to believe that to be true and to live into that, to practice it, to embody it, to trust it? That was a lot.
You spoke of land, right? And we know that people who have lived close to the land, people that we call indigenous across this nation, and also across the world, have been trying to, tell the colonial system for a long time, like, hey, this land is where it's at. Like, you can't just come up in here and you can't just run roughshod all over it and not respect it and do all these things. Like, it's going to do a thing that's going to get back. It's been here longer than us. We might want to show it some deference and respect. But as somebody who was a city dweller, I didn't know that in my personal experience, right? Like, I wasn't a person. So a lot of times people ask me like, oh, has this land been in your family? Has your family been landed? And I'm like, no. Actually, quite the opposite. I grew up in New York City, in Queens, New York. I run the streets of Brooklyn in my high school years, and then I went from urban environment to urban environment to urban environment. And so my ancestors essentially begged me to get onto some land, right? Because they were like, the next phase of your evolution, of the evolution of the vision of the work that you're supposed to do, requires you to be landed, right? So I've only been on land for a little over a year that I'm stewarding, right? And for me, my ability, and this is why Acorn is so important. And I don't plug Acorn to plug Acorn. I'm like, no, y'all, we are actually cultivating the place where you do some of these practices here, right? Like, this place is being cultivated, seeded as a place where we can all dream a freedom future, right? So whatever your dream is, right? So I'm not trying to invest you necessarily into just my dream, but whatever your
Right.
freedom future dream is, where this is the energy that's going into the land.
Mhm.
This is the energy that is in every building that we have on this land, right?
Mm.
So this becomes, we are making it. It's not just me. We are making it. Everybody who has stepped their foot, put their breath into this earth is making it a place where we can be in these very practices that you're talking about. Because we know everybody can't do that at their house, right? We know everybody doesn't have access to acres and acres of land in their natural environment, right? So we're creating this place to be that touchstone, right? And we're connected to other places that are sprouting up across the US and in the Caribbean as well that are trying to do the same thing, right? And so that collective energy means that my ability to be in that place of absolute perfection and sitting with all of the things and becoming deeply aware of my own discomforts has been exponentially added to, allowed for, provided for since I've been on this land, right? And as a Black person, first and foremost, returning to a piece of land in the South has meant really decolonizing my relationship to the land, right? My relationship to the land of the South of the United States. As a trans person, the notion of stewarding land in which trans people could find themselves in their own wholeness is like so far beyond anything that I could have thought of or dreamed into that it just elates me with joy half of the time where I'm like, oh my God, other trans people are going to know, right? That they can have land because they come and they see and they're with me in this land, right? And all of that together, right? And, you know, witnessing and watching the ways in which this next generation of young people, this next generation of children and babies that are connected to this place are also going to have access to this land. You know, I often refer to Acorn as an anchor. And that to me is very much like that anchor ship metaphor, where it's like you can go out and do and come, but you know you have a place that you can root back into that's going to have all stuff, right? You don't anchor down in some place that is barren and dry. You want to anchor down in the place where you can gather your resources, right?
Yes.
And then more so through the pandemic, quite frankly, it's also become a safe haven. You know, we have had people who have needed to just get out of New York, you know, in the throes of, you know, firecrackers and sirens and things like that. And they're like, listen, I just need to be able to come and go to a place where I can walk outside and it doesn't feel like I have to be in constant threat, right? So that their systems could downgrade. We have people who have now, after 10 months of this pandemic, you know, when they're getting to the brink, right? Everybody didn't go shelter in place at a place that was actually safe for them.
Yes.
Right. So, and maybe psychically safe or emotionally safe or spiritually safe and sometimes physically safe. So now we're getting requests from the people who are like, I literally can't be in this place anymore. I just need a place where I can go so I can have enough space to figure out what I need to do next. Right. So this place, this land place is doing so much of the work with us at this point, you know, to get to those freedom places, to allow those freedom visions to come out of ourselves naturally. Yeah, it's kind of wild. Anyway, there's so much that I can talk about in there, like the reconnection to my birth family as like my siblings and my nieces and nephew and great nephew have come to this land, right? And how that's shifting the future of my birth family as well, right? So it's not even just movement family or people who are more extended outside of me, but it's also the people, the blood, whose blood I share, right? Who are experiencing these things. It's a beautiful gift, Ron. I don't even, most of the time I'm like, I wake up in the morning, I come out my little bedroom, and I'm like, I'm still here. 8 acres, the trees, the river, the ponds, birds, I'm like, great, I'm still here. So,
Yes,
yeah.
I'm still here. I think that's a beautiful place to end the dreaming conversation for now.
Yeah.
I think it's a great place to like, I'm still here. I love that.
Yeah.
I love it. I
Yeah.
love it. I love it. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Of
And
course.
okay, I want to say one thing, which is, as a person who grew up in a rural place on land that my family has been stewarding, also Muskogee Creek territory in central Georgia, um, I feel you. And I think that is a big part of what gives me a sense of spaciousness today, is that I grew up in a place where I was running around in pine forests and staring up at the stars and surrounded by the sounds of supposed silence that are present with you, and feeling watched, always watched by the land, always held,
Yeah.
always stewarded.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you for bringing me back to that place.
Yes.
And I can't wait to come visit Acorn.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to put the Acorn banner up again so that folks who are tuning in visually can check that out. Please go visit the Acorn Center for Freedom's website, Acorn Center 4, that's the number 4, freedom.com. Emanuel.
Something about our giving circle, Ron?
Yes, absolutely.
To add a little bit of context. So we have what we call a giving circle. So everything that we do in Acorn is based off of African diasporic circle life. And so the giving circle is so much more than just drop your donation and go. It is another sector of our very intentional community that we've been building. And so there's lots of goodies that come with being a part of the Giving Circle, including getting priority access to the land for retreats for yourself, or for groups that you're a part of. It also means that we will invite you to be in connection, deeper connection with co-givers with you. And then also that, you get to be a part of the co-conjuring of this space. As we are growing, we imagine our giving circle to be intergenerational. So we want this to be an opportunity for young people to understand what it means to give into freedom, right? So, and for your grandma and your auntie and your uncle Tyrone and all of those people to be a part of this. So you can give on behalf of yourself. You can give on behalf of your family. We invite you to invite your young people, your 7, 8-year-olds, and say, hey, we're going to give to this thing. This is what this program is. We do family programming. Or give on behalf of people who have our ancestors, right? On behalf of your grandparents, on behalf of those people who never got a chance to reconnect, right? Knowing that giving in this way, and being encircled in this way, gives us trans time power, right, towards this vision. So please join us in the Giving Circle. It's so much more than just donations.
Yes.
I can't even say all the things. And thank you so much, Ron, for letting folks know about that opportunity as well.
Yes, thank you for that deeper understanding of what it means to be a part of the Acorn community through giving. As we close out, is there anything that you want to offer in terms of resources or things that have been inspiring you before we part?
Because I watched the other episodes, I was like, I'm ready for it.
Yes, all right. Visuals, we love it. Yes, look at the stack.
There are a few things that I will offer. The first one is by Omisade Burney-Scott and a bunch of other magic dope Black women. Messages Menopausal Multiverse. You can find this on Black Girl's Guide to Menopause. And it's a beautiful offering from women who I believe are all and gender nonconforming folks who are all 50 plus, telling us how to live life. It's broken down by elementals. It's very good. Get this. Beautiful. It's totally worth it. and it's like my daily meditation.
Mm.
Second is The Secret Lives of Church Ladies, which was recommended to me by Monet Marshall, who is an artist in North Carolina. It's a sweet read. It's a pleasure read. Read for pleasure, people. We gotta read for pleasure. Don't just read for healing and for work and political understanding. Read for pleasure. This is a pleasure read. Do it, get it, be with it. It's so good.
Yes.
Parable of the Talents, which by Octavia E. Butler. A lot of people, last year, Parable of the Sower made the New York Times bestseller list. Let's make Parable of the Talents. This is the second part of that manual that gives you more information about how to live in these times.
Yes.
I'm always looking for books and materials that help me decolonize my relationships and practice freedom inside of my relationships. So my latest obsession, all of my friends know, is Polysecure. I've probably mailed this book out to about 10 people already. It's by Jessica Fern, and it talks about attachment trauma and consensual non-monogamy. Even if you are not non-monogamous, this book is amazing at talking about and breaking down how we do secure attachments with people, with consent, with awareness and choicefulness and joy. And it's all good. And then the last book, which I forgot to bring up, is the book Bodyfulness. I forget who the author is, but the title of it is Bodyfulness. And it's this exposition into embodiment that kind of goes beyond embodiment. It's sort of asking us to reorientate ourselves towards the body being the center of our lives. So those are the things that are holding me right now. I always have a stack of books around me somewhere. Get them, read them, be with them, ask me about them on social medias. I'll talk to you about them forever.
Yes. All right. Well, we've got Emanuel's social media presence in the show notes, I believe. If not, I'll make sure that they're in there so you can follow up on that offer if you so choose. I will make sure to also get links to all of those wonderful texts in the show notes in the coming days. Thank you so much, Emanuel, for spending this time with me and with us. Thank you for your generosity of spirit and of practice here on this show. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. The next episode will be with Adrienne Marie Brown on January 21st. So excited to keep this vision train, this dreaming train in motion. And I look forward to connecting with folks out there in the world. Peace.
All right. Thank you
blessings
so much, Ron.
and
Bye,
pleasure
everyone.
to everyone. All right.
Thank you.